Spoiler warning ahead, and if you're wondering, I will not be including the Daniel Craig movies, as they have their own timeline. With that, let's begin. The original James Bond movie timeline. 1962. In 1962, Bond is ordered to go to Jamaica to investigate the murder of another British Secret Service agent, where he uncovers a nefarious plot by the sinister Dr. No. In Jamaica, Bond teams up with local fisherman Coral and CIA agent Felix Slider. And upon reaching Jamaica, Bond, Felix, and Coral figure out that Dr. No has radiation on his island, with there being a legend of a dragon on the island. Bond and Coral go to investigate, with Bond meeting local shell diver Honey Rider, with the three going deeper in Dr. No's island. Coral is sadly set on fire by a machine built by Dr. No, which is just a vehicle with flamethrowers made to look like a dragon to burn down radiation. Honey and James are kidnapped by Dr. No's troops. Dr. No reveals that he's employed by Spectre and is planning to mess up local American rockets using a radiation satellite. Bond later destroys the island by overheating everything, with Dr. No getting boiled to death in boiling water. Honey Rider and Bond then make out on a lifeboat that is getting towed by Felix Slider. 1963. Spectre makes their film debut in 1963, where they're planning to start a Russian and Britain war, with them also wanting to steal this communication device and get revenge on Bond for killing Dr. No. To do this, they're manipulating Soviet agent Tatiana and James Bond, but the two fall in love and put a stop to Spectre's plan, and by doing so, they kill one of their top men and their main henchwoman. 1964. In 1964, Bond finally gets a break from Spectre, but has to deal with a man called Goldfinger, who is secretly planning to nuke Fort Knox in exchange for money from these terrorists, and the fact that it will increase his economic gold status. Bond later puts a stop to this by teaming up with Goldfinger's main pilot, Pussy Galore, with Goldfinger eventually dying by falling out of a plane to his death. 1965. In 1965, Bond once again has to deal with Spectre, who hijacked 2 atomic bombs and is planning to hold the island NATO for ransom. Bond is sent to investigate, where he meets someone who is secretly working with Spectre, and the person he's taking care of, Domino, eventually teams up with Bond and put a stop to their plan by having the boat with that guy crash. 1966. In 1966, Bond is sent to arrest a World War II hero for stealing Nazi gold and committing murder. Bond eventually captures the man, who gives him the option to commit suicide. Bond then feeds the guy's octopus for him, and then finds the guy poisoned with Bond reporting it as drowning in order to help preserve his honor. 1967. In 1967, Bond again has to deal with Spectre, who is now kidnapping Soviet and American astronauts with this rocket they made, with Bond faking his death prior to help avoid Spectre. He then disguises himself as a Japanese man, with him falling in love with a Japanese agent named Aki, with both of them disappointed that she can't be his fake wife. To make matters worse, she is killed in a failed attempt to kill Bond, with Bond then having his fake wife be a woman named Kissy Suzuki, who seems to be immune to his affection. But they later kiss on a mountain, which could just be in the heat of the moment. Bond and Kissy discover Spectre's lair is inside a volcano, with her going to get help, and with Bond breaking Spectre's lair, where he then meets their leader for the first time, Blofeld. Kissy then gets the backup, and a battle goes ensued, with Bond getting the kidnapped astronauts to help with the battle, and with Blofeld getting away, but not before blowing up the base, with Bond and Kissy kissing on a raft, reminiscent of Funny Rider in the first movie, including the fact that Kissy's in the white bikini also. 1969. In 1969, Bond meets a suicidal woman named Tracy, who he later gets a crush on, but not before her father, who is a gangster, asks him to marry her. In exchange, he'll give him information about Blofeld. Bond isn't really the marrying type, but later shows affection for Tracy, and Tracy showing the same. With both of them finding out Blofeld's plan is to use bacterial warfare in exchange for immunity for all of his crimes, complete with a load soda money. Bond and Tracy put a stop to this, with Bond and Tracy getting married, but sadly, Blofeld murders Tracy, with Bond vowing revenge, but not before crying over his dead wife. In 1971, Bond goes on a revenge spree for Blofeld, where he discovers a plot of Blofeld to turn some of his minions into clones of himself, with Blofeld seemingly getting killed by Bond, with Bond then set on another mission about this diamond scheme, where he meets a diamond smuggler named Tiffany Case, who he falls in love with, where Bond and Tiffany later discover that Blofeld is the one behind this, who's using the stolen diamonds to build a laser satellite in an attempt to win this war he created with Spectre and multiple governments. Bond and Tiffany destroy Blofeld's new lair, with Blofeld's fate being unknown, with Bond and Tiffany making out on a cruise. 1973. In 1973, Bond is ordered to investigate the murders of fellow British agents in New Orleans, where Bond teams up with the son of Coral and the supposed CIA agent, Rosie Carver, where it's revealed that Rosie's actually working with this drug empire whose leader is actually the ambassador of an island in New Orleans who goes under the alias Mr. Big. Rosie is then killed by Mr. Big, and Bond then strikes a love with Mr. Big's psychic. They then take down Mr. Big's drug empire by setting the plants on fire, with Mr. Big swallowing one of Bond's gadgets, where he then inflated like a balloon and exploded. 1974. In 1974, Bond gets a golden bullet mailed to him with his code name 007 engraved in the bullet, with the fingerprints of a renowned hitman, Francisco Scaramanga, on it. Bond is put on leave for his protection, which infuriates him due to him wanting to solve this mystery with the Solex, a device that can help solve the energy crisis. Bond then goes rogue, trying to stop Francisco in order for him to get back to work. But Bond discovers Francisco's mistress, Andrea Anders, is the one who sent the bullet, and hopes Bond would kill him due to Scaramanga being abusive to her. Bond is also teaming up with a fellow MI6 agent, Mary Goodnight. Bond later realizes, coincidentally, Francisco is tied to the Solex, with him stealing it, and Andrea getting killed, with Francisco taking Mary Goodnight to be his new mistress. Bond then discovers Scaramanga's plan is to make solar-powered machines run by the Solex, with Bond killing Francisco and Mary Goodnight killing the head mechanic, with him falling into the machinery, causing a huge explosion on his island, with Bond and Mary making out on Francisco's boat. 1977. In 1977, Bond is attacked by a Russian agent who he kills on the mountains, with Bond then getting signed to a new mission where he has to investigate this madman who is planning to start a nuclear war between the surface so he can live peacefully in his new underwater society. Bond teams up with a Russian agent named Triple X, who he falls in love with, but it's revealed that her boyfriend was the one he killed on the mountains, with her saying that he'll kill him after the mission is done. Bond also has to deal with this assassin named Jaws, a very tall man with sharp metal teeth. Bond runs into Jaws several times, with Bond and Triple X eventually stopping this madman by having his underwater society crumble, with Triple X forgiving Bond and eventually making out on the escape pod with their bosses scene, and with Jaws escaping the destroyed underwater building. 1979. In 1979, this new rocket, known as Moonraker, is hijacked, with Bond investigating. He talks to the developer of it, named Drax, who Bond finds suspicious. With Bond investigating further, he realizes that Drax was the one who stole it. Bond teams up with a woman named Dr. Holly Goodhead, a female scientist who is into space. They sneak on to one of Drax's rockets, where they discover Drax has a secret space base, where he reveals his plan of using this ancient flower to kill all life on Earth that isn't plants or animals, in order to repopulate the Earth in a new and quote-unquote better society, with Drax also hiring Jaws to kill Bond and Dr. Holly Goodhead. But Jaws falls in love with this woman named Dolly, with Jaws and Dolly helping Bond after they realize they don't fit Drax's perfect world, with the space base exploding after astronauts with lasers came and took down many of Drax's troops, with Drax getting launched into space after being poisoned, and Jaws and Dolly landing in the ocean with half of the base, with the other half exploding, and Bond and Dr. Holly Goodhead going back to Earth on a rocket. 1981. In 1981, Bond finally kills a now crippled Blofeld after visiting his wife's grave, with Bond now assigned to another mission where he has to find this missing device underwater, with this one family previously looking for it before they got murdered, leaving their daughter the only survivor, with Bond meeting the daughter who wants revenge, with Bond trying to warn her against revenge, probably because of what he did with Blofeld. And Bond discovers one of his allies in this mission is secretly one of the people who hired the murderer and is looking for the device for him to sell to the Russians. Bond and the daughter, Melina Havelock, eventually confronting the villain, with her about to kill him, but Bond once again warns her. Before she can kill him, though, the villain's old friend, who is one of Bond's recent allies, kills him for her, with Bond breaking the device so no one can have it. Bond and Melina then make out on a boat. 1983. In 1983, Bond is sent to retrieve this Fabergé egg after 009 tragically died trying to get it, with Bond teaming up with Octopussy, leader of the Octopussy cult, and is also the daughter of the World War II hero he killed in the 60s. Bond and her fall in love, with her apparently doing diamond smuggling, but it's actually a ploy by her two henchmen who are secretly working with this Russian general named Olaf, who replaced the diamonds with a nuclear bomb so it'll blow up in one of Octopussy's circuses, which is next to a military base, which will make many people in the Deep South lose faith in the U.S., causing Olaf to have reason to invade neighboring countries. Bond and Octopussy put a stop to this, with Olaf being gunned down at a border, and with Octopussy's two henchmen dying on an airplane. 1985. In 1985, Bond finds a microchip in one of his dead comrades, where he then investigates the chips, where he discovered it's made by a man named Max Zorin of Zorin Industries, who has a dastardly plan of creating an artificial earthquake to flood Silicon Valley so he and his associates can be the kings of the microchip industry. Bond teams up with Stacy Stunton, a woman whose company was illegally bought out by Max Zorin, with them figuring out his plan and putting a stop to it, leading to a final battle with Max and Bond on the Brooklyn Bridge, with Max's blimp heavily damaged, leading to Max falling off the bridge, but not before doing a crazy laugh, and with his two henchmen accidentally blowing themselves up on what's left on the blimp. 1986. In 1986, Bond and 006 team up to penetrate a foreign military base, but sadly, 006 is seemingly killed, with Bond narrowly escaping. 1987. In 1987, Bond is almost assassinated during a training exercise, with several of his partners being killed. Bond then helps General Koskov to escape his homeland, but is later kidnapped, and it soon turns out that the person who kidnapped him was a former general, now arms dealer, named Brad Whitaker, who has a bit of a Napoleon complex. And it's soon apparent that General Koskov is secretly working with Brad by doing illegal shipments in order to wipe out a rebel group to become ridiculously rich. But Bond puts a stop to this by killing Brad and having Koskov arrested. 1989. In 1989, Bond and Felix stop drug lord Sanchez before going to Felix's wedding, where Bond is somewhat reminded of his wife Tracy. But sadly, during Felix and his wife's honeymoon, Sanchez escapes with help with Felix's partner, who he bribed, and kidnaps Felix, kills his wife, and has Felix get maimed by shark exposure. Bond then set out to get revenge on Sanchez, where, by chance, is convinced that Bond is willing to help Sanchez after recently Bond's license to kill got revoked. Bond then puts paranoia in Sanchez, causing him to bring down his own drug empire, with Bond then getting helped by Sanchez's abused girlfriend, Loopy, and female CIA agent, Pam Bouvier, with Bond eventually setting fire to Sanchez's drug factory, causing him to drive away, with Bond then jumping on him, where they then fight around a highway, where Bond uses Sanchez's liquid drug and a lighter Felix gave him to set Sanchez on fire, causing his truck next to him to explode, killing Sanchez, with Bond then making out with Pam during a party. Somewhere between 1989 and 1995, Bond gets his old job back. 1995. In 1995, Bond's boss, M, has been replaced by a female who also goes under the title M, and Bond is ordered to investigate the raid at a military Russian base, leaving only one survivor and one kidnappee. Bond and the survivor, named Natalia Stevanova, team up where they found out this is to control the Goodnight satellite, a satellite that's able to launch an EMP beam that's stronger than any other EMP, capable of heavily damaging buildings itself that are heavily run on computers, and that completely erase computer data. To make matters worse, Bond finds out his old partner, 006, is alive and is running this operation, and that the man he kidnapped is secretly working for him. Same with the general he fought when he thought his partner was killed. Their plan is to rob the richest banks using digital warfare and erase all records that they did so. Bond puts a stop to this, leading to a final fight above 006's lair, where Bond lets him fall to his death, and with his main partner getting frozen to death by liquid nitrogen, with Bond and Natalia making out at the end. 1997. In 1997, Bond is ordered to investigate the troubles with Britain and Chinese battleships, where he teams up with Chinese agent Wai Lin, who's all about the mission and not James's romance, with both of them finding out that a news company / magazine distributor is doing this to start a Chinese and Britain war in order to get full publicity and make their news company big, with their leader comparing himself to Napoleon and even God, with Bond and Wai Lin infiltrating one of his stealth battleships in order to stop his final plan to start a war, with all of them succeeding, with the main leader getting killed by his own weapon, and Wai Lin and Bond making out on a piece of debris after Britain battleships destroyed the boat. 1999. In 1999, Bond is ordered to retrieve the stolen money from a man named Mr. King, who died when he was about to get his money due to there being a bomb in it, which heavily damaged the MI6 headquarters, with James almost again the assassin who kills herself in order to not anger her boss, which will apparently be a worse fate than death. James is ordered to investigate and protect King's daughter, Electra King, who was kidnapped several years back, leaving her ear heavily damaged, and she is all about protecting her father's oil company, which he inherited from his dead wife. And Bond and Christie seem to have a bit of a romance going on, and that the man who kidnapped her is somewhat behind this, with a bullet in his brain slowly killing him, but making the rest of his body stronger. But to make things sad, Electra King is the one who is behind this, who apparently developed some form of Stockholm Syndrome with her kidnapper, who also fell in love with her, and that's how she was able to escape. And that's why she had the murder of her father out of revenge for not paying the ransom, which was mostly the fault of them, who they're also planning to kill. But Bond puts a stop to their plan and kills Electra and her lover, while he has this love story with this female doctor named Dr. Christmas Jones. This movie's also the last time we see Q, who retires. And if you don't remember, Q is the man who made all of James Bond's weapons throughout the franchise. 2001. In 2001, Bond is sent to Korea to make a fake deal with a rogue colonel using diamonds in exchange for information about his latest weapons. But he figures out who Bond is and tries to have him killed, leading him to fall off a waterfall, with his father then capturing Bond and suffering 14 months of torture. In 2002, Bond is traded for Tainlin Zhao, aka the right-hand man of that rogue colonel who was recently captured in China, who apparently have this facelift that makes him look paler and have these little dots in his face that was apparently not finished, where Bond is eventually put on leave out of fear he may have given up information due to the drugs he was on, where he then tries to figure out what to do to prove his innocence, leading him to try to solve this new mystery with Tainlin Zhao, where he meets Jinx in Cuba, where they find out that the facelift I mentioned earlier is surgery to change his ethnicity, where Bond and Jinx inadvertently destroy the building, where Bond is recruited by M once again to now solve this mystery with Gustavo Graves, a man who made this satellite that will quote-unquote revolutionize the world, where Bond goes to his presentation in his ice palace, where Bond finds out that Gustavo is actually that Korean colonel who changes ethnicity, and the satellite is secretly a laser for him to win any war he wants, with Bond and Jinx pretty a stop to his plan, with Gustavo falling into a propeller on a plane, causing it to crash and kill him, with Bond and Jinx then having sex in an island house. In conclusion, Bond looks good for someone who should be in their 70s.